Welcome back. This is Will at Work. I'm Kevin, and on this show we take a look at my various consoles and we see if they work. I believe I have the largest unique collection of video game consoles in the world. We're approaching 300 of them in my collection, and yeah, we're probably going to top out somewhere near or over 300 as of July 2021 when this is recorded. I am an active collector, so when I get done, who knows how many there ever will be. I do know that I have most of the main video game consoles everyone has ever heard of or seen. I definitely don't have about half a dozen, maybe 10 systems that are known to exist but are very expensive. For instance, I do not currently have an Adventure Vision. I don't have a Hartung 8-bit. I don't have a Bandai 8000, etc. There are some just basically units that were sold overseas that are hard to get, but domestically, as far as the United States goes, I believe the only one I don't have is the Adventure Vision. Of course, there's always prototypes. I don't generally collect prototypes. It's hard to get anything that there's one of. It's also hard to determine a value of something that was never commercially released. Something, of course, like the Nintendo, PlayStation, is obviously going to fetch you a great deal of money if you had that one unit. And, we all, as collectors, can't have those things. Only one person can, and that's just a different kind of collecting, I think. I tend to like to get things that were commercially available. There are certainly, Odyssey 3s out there, and 3DO M2s, things of that nature, in different states of prototype or parts or developer boards and things of that nature. It's just not what I currently collect. If I was a millionaire, maybe I would collect those things too, but basically I just go for commercial systems that are unique. And today we are looking at one of the most expensive units in my collection. It may be the most expensive. I certainly paid a lot for it. It's possible my laser active, if I get it fully working, because of all of the things I have for it, may be worth a little bit more. But the laser active is also often priced high online. I'm not always sure it fetches the prices people ask for it. Here we have one of the craziest systems ever been released, in the sense of bad idea, total failure, but also extremely rare. And this version that I have is totally mint. This is my hand here. This is the box. It is a large box, and it is in great shape. And finding one of these in this kind of condition is rare. You can get one of these off of eBay. Probably cost you, if you wanted it right away, probably cost you about $4,000 or $5,000. So yeah, they are just considered to be really rare. And it's a bit silly, and I'm going to explain it briefly. We have this Commodore game system. Same people who made the Commodore 64. Very famous 8-bit computer when the 8-bit computer craze was going on. They released that Commodore 64 computer, I think, around 1982 or something. Maybe even earlier than that. I'm not sure. And it was a huge success for Commodore. It was basically the most popular computer, home computer of that era. and it sold like crazy. And it also did really well in the UK. What Commodore did here is they took the Commodore 64 circuit board, essentially, put it inside a different case, rotated the cartridge port vertically, removed the keyboard, put in a different ROM inside so that it has like a splash screen, and they sold it as a game system. Packed it in with a game cartridge and a controller. And they figured developers would make games for the game cartridge. Now listen, this isn't a terrible idea if we look back and say, had they released this around 1982 when the Commodore 64 was out and new. Maybe, it came out even earlier, and it might have come out in 1980 or something. I'm not sure. But had this been released then, 8-bit, good games, would have predated the NES around the world, has similar capability as the Nintendo Entertainment System, good sound, etc. And had they sold it at a lower price because it didn't contain the keyboard, and, whatever, mass market adoption and all that, it might have been a winner. It might have been. Because, at that point, you were still going up against, like, say, the Atari 2600 or maybe the 5200. 83, you had the video game crash, and a lot of companies lost their shirts on making video game systems because the market was too saturated. But had they done that, this might have been one of the ones that rose to the surface, right? Nintendo, they brought back the market. Commodore, they had enough money due to the Commodore 64, they could have stayed in. Unfortunately, this didn't come out in 1982. This came out in 1990. Way past its time to be relative, basically. It's too late. Not only that, there's nothing special about it. So you could get a regular Commodore 64, a used one even, with a cartridge port on the back, which they all had, and they had a keyboard. You didn't need to buy the disc drive or the tape drive or use a cassette tape thing and all, but you could. But you didn't need it if you just wanted to play cartridge games. So it would have been cheaper to buy Commodore 64. This was terrible. This was a bad idea. I don't know what Commodore was thinking, but from what I understand of Commodore history, I've read enough about it, and it sounds to me, oddly, that Commodore was such a large company, but it was really kind of sort of mismanaged to a point where there were different sort of like divisions that were kind of on autopilot. Like there wasn't some Steve Jobs kind of driving things forward, right? There were different people in different groups kind of working on different ideas independently, and there was nobody to say no. I'm sure there was when it came to money, but there was like, oh, this is a new product, you guys are going to release this, you've done all your research on it, sounds like a winner, let's do it. And things came out that really shouldn't have from Commodore, and this is a glowing example. Now, sometimes people will tell you that there was a video game console before this one by Commodore. Sort of true. It's called I believe it's called the Commodore Max, or the Max machine. It was released in Japan. It was based on the VIC-20, which was earlier than the Commodore 64. And it actually had a sort of one of them flat keyboards on it, silver case. I think it's more like a computer. If it was billed as a video game machine, then it would end up in my collection at some point. So we may see one at some point. They are also rare, but not as rare as this. Yeah. But this was basically, an attempt by Commodore to focus on this video game market. And it kind of shows you, they just didn't know what the hell they were doing, man. They just didn't know. Commodore 64 disk drive, man. You already got it. Commodore, what are you doing? It's like they were trying to fool people. So this thing was a total failure. Now it does come with a game cartridge. It came with this multi-cart that had 4 games on it. Not terrible games. You had this Flimbo's Quest. It's kind of like a platformer. Fiendish Freddy's Big Top of Fun, which is kind of like a different types of mini games. You had Clax, which was sort of like a Tetris thing at the time. And International Soccer, which was big over in the UK. Some people think it's terrible, but I think it was a lot of fun for people that played it. So it wasn't bad. It did come with this awful controller, which we'll look at as well. And yeah, the controller you could just throw in the trash and plug in your own controller. Why they put this one in here when the original Commodore controllers were actually pretty good, although there was some sort of lawsuit about those with Atari. I'm not sure. Maybe they weren't allowed to make them anymore or something. I don't know. Originally, something happened originally where that one button joystick from Commodore had you know, Atari and them had gone back and forth over who owned the rights to that or something along those lines. I don't know the whole story. You know, Commodore and Atari computers were closely linked together because the owner of Commodore at that time, I think his name was Jack Tramiel, had left Commodore and went to Atari, right? And there was also, you know, around the 16-bit era, there was some competition in terms of like the Amiga computer, like it was going to be Atari's, and then Commodore bought it or something, and so there was always this back and forth between Atari and Commodore. They were very tightly linked together with a lot of their technology and ideas and such, and they were basically competing against each other for a market that was dwindling because they couldn't get into businesses. And they also, while they had initially a successful proprietary chip manufacturing setup, they weren't able to eventually compete with the PC, and were sort of left in the dust. So anyway, that's not for today. Today is for this. Now, a couple of things about this for what we're doing here to make sure this works. This was only released in the UK, and it is PAL. I do have a cable that we will connect to it that will allow us to have composite out. We'll take a look at what kind of display it is and see what kind of composite out we get. If it's not too bad, if we only lose a couple of scan lines, which is what we should lose, I'll bring it over to the video side and you can see a direct feed of what the games look like. If that's not the case and it's really shifted, I do have now a PAL monitor, and I can at least get it to display on the monitor. You of course will see some flicker, but we'll all be able to see if it works properly. I do now also have a what do they call it, an upscale converter, scale up converter for power converter. So I can go from 120 to 240 volt, etc. to drive these systems. I made that investment finally. I don't have that many PAL systems in this collection, but there's a few, and I've decided, you know, if I want to do this right, I need to make sure I have the right hardware to at least check these things out. So I picked that up and a monitor, so at the very least we'll be able to make sure these things work. All right, so let's take this out of the nice looking box here. Now, if you're curious about the rear of the box, it just has a bunch of different flags and different country language stuff about each one of the 4 games. It's not full of pictures and stuff, so it's not really that interesting. Because Commodore was international, so you know, English, French, Spanish, German, Italian, and I'm going to say Dutch. So we have the original foam. have the... Keep this bag away from babies and children. Alright, we know that. We don't need to worry about that. So we have a original Commodore power supply here. Unit itself. Now the interesting thing, oh, look at this power supply. It probably, you know, yeah, 220, 50 hertz power supply, power brick, basically. These things are always notoriously big and bulky. The only thing about this that I don't know, and I am going to use the power up converter, etc., but the output is simply a 9 volt, 1 amp, and a 5 volt, 1.7 amp signal. And I wonder, like, if because I do have a normal Commodore power brick, I wonder if I drove it in to this, if it would work. Let me point out, I am not going to try to do that, because this thing was really expensive, and I don't want to take any risks, but my guess is it would probably work fine. It would still be in PAL, though. I just have to check, like, there's different regions of PAL, too. Like, PAL's kind of a weird thing. Please read me first, Commodore. We know you could have bought a Commodore 64, but we thank you for buying this instead. You're helping us all keep our job. We know you are keen to jump straight in and get started. However, please take time to read this leaflet. It contains information that will help you to set up and operate your new Commodore system. Here is a step-by-step guide to setting up your C64 game system. That's what the C64 GS stands for. Some games are designed to work with the joystick plugged into port 2. If you experience any difficulty in operating a game correctly, please try with the joystick plugged into control port 2. Most games were designed to work with control port 2. Why? It had something to do with control, if you had the joystick in port 1 and you moved it around, it would actually send text to the basic language display, right? So I guess like that might create errors, so they decided, you know what, we're not going to do that. We'll just use number 2, which doesn't cause this kind of weirdness if somebody's got their joystick plugged in. Something along those lines. Now, the unfortunate thing about this system as well is that since it does not in fact have a keyboard, there are games which, especially earlier cartridges that didn't work with this, that do require the keyboard. Pick 1 or 2 players, put in your name for the high score, etc., and you can't. Now, let's see here. It does say something about the keyboard here. It might be interesting to see. Yeah, this guide is even talking about having a keyboard. This kind of shows you how they just didn't. They call it the C64 game system here, but they reference it having a keyboard, and it does not. And you might say to yourself, well, maybe they planned on putting a keyboard on here. They didn't. There's no actual ports. The only port here, this is just like video port, right? There's not a television switch here. There are a couple of, there's like a tape port and something else here, a serial port that you can't use a keyboard with that, but that you could use. However, they took off all the capacitors and things to make those work, and they're behind that plastic. You'd have to cut the plastic open, solder up. It's not worth it, man. Just go buy a Commodore 64. What does this say here? It says, make sure your machine has been powered on for more than 30 seconds. If you have any more cartridges, try a different one. Finally, there are a couple of keys that are not marked or maybe marked differently from the illustrations in the manual. The space bar is in fact the only key on the keyboard that isn't marked, so it's dead easy to find the long bar underneath all the other keys. Oh, really? The so-called control key may be marked control on your machine. Remember the old adage, when all else fails, read the instructions. Thanks for buying a Commodore 64, which we hope we give you years of enjoyment. Yeah, sure guys. It's not really a Commodore 64 though, is it? I mean, it sorta is. Commodore 64 game system. Hilarious. So, in terms of companies that supported this, Ocean was one, and they made a bunch of games on cartridge, and you know, I do have a couple of them, and one of them I do have is the Terminator 2 cartridge that's branded for use with the C64 game system, and it does require a keyboard, so you can't actually start playing with it. So it's a bit of a novelty to have the one cartridge that they designed for this system that doesn't work. Could you imagine going and buying it and taking it home and plugging it in and then finding that it asks for you to use the keyboard? That's what we're dealing with here. So it's nice to have the manuals and everything though. Turn on the TV set. It'd be funny if there was like some secret keyboard that popped out that nobody knew about. Like, oh my god, it's been here all along. Nothing that cool will happen though. But now, I don't know all of the rules. I don't know, with these old 8-bit systems, I don't know if they could have done something with the ROM to add a keyboard, for instance, to the cartridge or the joystick port, some sort of external keyboard. Probably not. Just saying. I don't know if that would have been the thing. It is weird. It's weird in general. I don't know if maybe they could have put one in with the cartridge port to add a keyboard to it. Also kind of weird. Made in West Germany. That's what it says right there on the little very silverly thing. 15 watts. Commodore C64 GS. That's that famous silver cardboard that Commodore liked to put on things. As an RF shield. Hey, whatever worked, right? So we have the Quick Connect, and we have the manual, which is even smaller than the Quick Connect guide. This just tells you about the games. And I'll tell you, the Commodore 64 was a big thing for pirating software, as was most 8-bit games back in those days. And these are some pictures of some games you can play. Ninja Remix. It's like Last Ninja or something. Myth. Vendetta. And Last Ninja 3. They picked some games that look nice, but not necessarily the ones that people wanted to play all the time. When I had a Commodore 64, we almost never used cartridges. The only cartridge that sat in mine was a Final Cartridge 3. A lot of people had a Fast Load or a Mach 5. That would make the disk drive go faster. It can give you some additional commands and things to make it work. It would be useless on this since you can't connect a disk drive to it or a tape drive of any sort. But I did wonder sometimes, like, why they didn't, at that time when I was young, why they didn't do more with cartridges, because there would be no load times. I mean, one of the detriment to the Commodore 64 was the load times, especially with some games that weren't able to use like the fast loading cartridges. They often suffered terribly from load times, and I always thought, they could do some sort of hybrid where you put a game cartridge in that essentially had memory address space for frequently used assets, and then just used the disk drive to bring in some streaming data. It would have been quite a good combination. I know, cost concerns, but still, it was a very underused port on the system. All in all, the vast majority of people just use fast load cartridges. And so, this is what a cartridge looks like. Now, sometimes they would have other labels. This is a very generic label. Not like Commodore is going to spend a lot of money on this for us. Fiendish Freddy, International Soccer, Flimbo's Quest, and Clax. Now I do have a couple other ones. In fact, I do have a modern game that we'll look at as well that was made recently and is supposed to be compatible with this, and we will try it out. So somebody still makes stuff for the C64 GS. Well, at least they make it so it's compatible. Here we have that terrible joystick. It looks like it's, you know, it's split here in the middle. Could use a little bit of love on those screws. Those screws look really rusted too. You don't want to tighten plastic stuff too hard, but that's even doing that doesn't really help much. We have a mediocre button there, crappy trigger button up here, trigger button there, and you would think that there's 3 separate buttons, but I can pretty much guarantee you that all of these buttons do the same thing, because I would say 99.9% of Commodore 64 games only use one button. And that's just how it was. That was another weird thing I never quite understood, because the Sega Genesis had the same type of, you know, plug-in port, had multiple buttons, ColecoVision, television, all those sorts of things. You know, these 9-pin ports, why was there only ever support for one button? Yeah, I think it's just laziness in terms of, like, it would have taken more thought or something to make a second button do anything. And it would take up memory and all this sort of stuff, where just doing sort of the de facto one button deal would work. So you have suction cups. Does anybody ever use this type of play with suction cups? Do you suction cup down your system, your thing, and play? Because I always find them fairly unremarkable in terms of, like, the give that they have back and forth with suction cups never seem to be worthwhile versus, like, holding it in my hand. I don't know. Although these still work, so there's at least that. We will try that joystick out, but in general I have some Atari joysticks as well that we'll use to test this thing out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I think I've shown everything physical that's part of this. The cartridge goes into the slot here like this. Have to kind of give it a little bit of push, and then it's, you know, just in like that. And then in terms of on and off, there's a on-off switch here. There's your 2 joystick ports and your crazy round power plug that always has way more pins than I think is necessary. But what do I know? What do I know? I don't know nothing. And out like that. So what I'll do is I will set up everything here, and we'll either get it to go on the video out, which we'll switch to for you, or if that doesn't work, we'll come right back here. You won't even notice because it'll be in a flash, but we'll switch the configuration around, and I'll have the small monitor up in PAL, and we'll drive the signal out that way, and we'll see what we get there. If for some reason I can't get any video signal to come out of any of this, which could happen, that's the point of this show, is to find out if these things work, we'll come back here and we'll talk about it, and we'll see. Okay, I don't know why, but the video stopped there all of a sudden, but it's fine. It's probably telling me to hurry my ass up. So anyway, we're going to switch over to either the video side or the monitor side. So I'm going to either get everything going and you're going to see the video out from this, and we'll play a few different games so you can get a feel for what they were like, as well as, if not, we'll come back and look at it on the stationary monitor. It won't look as nice, but we'll still be able to see if it works. For the record, I do have a Commodore 64. I believe it's an Australian unit. I don't know. I think it's kind of buried, but I was thinking maybe I could dig it up just so we could take a look at that Terminator cartridge and see if we could get it to work as well. I'm not 100% sure though that it's PAL. I'd have to go dig it up and look at it. We may or may not touch on that. I don't consider that a game system, but I do consider this one because it was marketed as one, and basically it is one, but it was a failure. Alright, so we're going to switch over to the video side. This is going to take 1 second, and if nothing works, we'll come right back here and we'll also talk about that, but hopefully it does. Here we go. We're looking at the Commodore 64 game system. I just kind of wanted to show you what it looks like if you didn't put a cartridge in. Normally on the Commodore 64, if you didn't put in a cartridge or some sort of expansion probably, you would always load up into the Microsoft Basic that it was like 2.0 that the Commodore 64 came with. Well, here you get this sort of splash screen, and that's built into the ROM. Now, I'm pretty sure that Microsoft Basic is probably still somewhere on that ROM because there are games out there that do use Basic. And so I would expect that it's probably compatible with those games. But either way, this is what the initial flash screen looks like. Almost looks like something hand-drawn that somebody made really quickly in a break room before they launched this. So I have a bunch of different games that I wanted to try out with this. The first one I'm going to put in is that Terminator 2 that supposedly does not allow you to start the game because you have to use the keyboard. Now, it's also possible that they, re-release this at some point. I'm not sure, but we'll give it a shot and see if it allows us to go or not go. And yep. So here we see press T for T2, press M for modern music, and press I for image maker. So we can't press any of those on here. And I'm going to try moving things around with the joystick just to see if, can get anything out of it. Let me try switching. Nothing. Let me try turning it off and holding down the button and turning it on. Made some groovy graphical displays, but that didn't do anything for us. All right, so I'm using a single button Atari joystick, and I'm going to try it now with this multi-button joystick that it came with, just to make sure that none of these buttons enabled me to choose anything. I would imagine all these buttons do the same thing, but let's try turning it off, switching ports, turn it on. So basically, yeah, you have to use this in a normal Commodore 64, which luckily I do have one, because it is absolutely unplayable, like everybody says. So, kind of ridiculous. If you would have purchased this back in the day, you'd be SOL. We'll put that one aside, and let's take a look at the pack-in, because that'll give us an idea of what you would have got initially when you first opened up the box on Christmas morning, and we're delighted to see that you got one of these 64 game systems with the crappy joystick. We're not going to use that joystick because I'm just afraid that joystick is just going to break in my hand. So I'm going to switch back to the Atari. All right, let's look at Fiendish Freddy's Big Top of Fun. Mindscape. Now, I'm not sure if we're getting any sound. Let me see if... There we go. Sound would be a mono. So this gives us a little bit of an idea of what the graphics would look like back in, 1982. The best way to look at the Commodore 64 is that it's very similar to the Nintendo Entertainment System in terms of power. They were not obviously running on the same hardware, etc.,
but they had basically very close to the same limitations. NES could do maybe some scrolling a little bit better. It had a little bit more sprites. Okay, one player. Take this beast. This is weird. I've never actually played this. Okay, we'll take this one. I don't know what they do. Now the sound chip on the Commodore 64 had a name. They called it SID, synthesizer or something. It had 3 voices, and at the time, it was an exceptional sound chip, much better than the NES sound chip. So that was one advantage that the Commodore had over the NES. But like I said, the NES had some advantages itself. But very similar graphics. Same resolution, same color limitations for the most part, etc. I think it might have had more. What am I doing here? Am I diving? I always love how 8-bit games would really kind of try to, do things that were far beyond their ability. Like this is probably a good example of that. It's a game, but what on earth am I doing? I can go left and right. Well, then I'm supposed to fall into the puddle. Alright, that's really lame. Really lame. But I guess it's a good demonstration overall of the kind of 8-bit graphics that it would represent in an era where it was basically becoming 16-bit. Okay, now we're going to juggle. I just got to catch these things. Oh. I don't know. I was supposed to throw one up in the air, I guess. This is really confusing. All right, Super Mario. This is not. All right, let's look at something else. We get the idea of this one. You guys are texting the wrong Kevin. It's fine. Somebody's texted me, but I think they mean a different Kevin. Being invited to go downstairs to go for a ride or something. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that's me. Nobody downstairs. This is some soccer game that some people seem to like. I looked at some videos about this, and some people seem to like this soccer game, and other people did not. I know that, later edition soccer games, Sensible Soccer was a big deal on the old 16-bit, like Amiga stuff. And it was kind of funny because it was mostly just like these like dots on the screen, basically. That's what it seemed like. But boy, people really liked Sensible Soccer back in the day. It was like Europe's version of Tecmo Bowl. Just on the blue team. Dun, 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 dun. Well, woo! That was rough. I think this might be 2-player or something, because I don't think the other guy's doing anything. All right. Well, that's 8-Bit Soccer. Let's look at what else we got here. Flimbo's Quest. System 3. I mean, and these all 4 games came on one cartridge, so that's kind of an unusual selection of games for one game cartridge, especially in the 8-bit era. Of course, it is 1990 when this came out. So. It's like some sort of puzzle game. Deliver. Whatever. So it's like some kind of platformer. Ah, the snail is armored. What am I supposed to do here? Can I shoot these things? Oh, what's going on? Oh, it just killed me. Alright, well. And then Klax is kind of... If you've never seen Klax, it was a more popular Tetris type game. I say more popular because it was released on multiple systems. Three tiles of the same color in a row. Came out for like the Lynx. Not sure what I'm supposed to be doing here. Alright, maybe I'm supposed to catch all of them, but that doesn't seem right. Yep, don't know what I'm doing. Alright, so that was the packing game. By this point, you'd probably be looking at getting a Super Nintendo or something. So I have Sam's Journey, which is a new game. I had to order this from Protovision out of Germany. And it is a cartridge that came out for the Commodore 64, but it's supposed to also work in C64 game system. Comes in a nice box with a manual. I'm going to actually record some of this video of what these are after this. Comes with a little treasure chest. I'll show you guys all in the other video of this. But let's go ahead and try and see if Sam's Journey, and this is a modern interpretation of what the Commodore 64 game system and Commodore 64 itself could do with a cartridge. Limitations apply. Let's give it a shot. Protovision. Knights of Bytes. I think Commodore could only display like 16 colors at a time. I think they were like a fixed palette, so you could do a little bit of dithering to get some additional color tricks in there, I'm sure. Alright, looks like it's going to work. No keyboard necessary. Sam was sleeping when a loud noise woke him up. Bam! A dazzling light flooded the room. Sam jumped out of bed to see what happened. He opened the door of his wardrobe. I'm always amazed that like people will make games like this. Suddenly a giant claw appeared. Like, I know you can sell maybe 1,000 copies, you know? I mean, maybe it's more than that, I don't know, but I wouldn't imagine it's like a lot. I don't know. What do I know? Whoa, what is going on? I'm supposed to go in that door down there? Apparently I am. All right, Sam, let's go. There's a butterfly. Woo! All right, well, this jump's a lot better than the other game. Can't get up there. That's too far away. Oh. Okay. Guess there's vines you can jump on. Did not know. Oh, there's a door. Okay. Making progress. This is alright so far. Huh. Happy grassland. Didn't I just do this? Am I doing this again? Or is this where I'm starting? Oh, no. It's kind of like a platformer. But the jumping is pretty good. Better than that last game. Ooh, and I can pick up a rock. Eat it. Oh, no Mario bouncing now. Actually, that's probably good. We don't need to be copycats. Nope, no bouncing. Nice, let's you restart. Good modern design. Oh, come on, I want to get a little further than this. We don't need those crystals. Oh, we can jump on somebody's head. The things I learned. Oh. Oh. Oh, now I'm a pirate. This game's crazy. Okay, that was like a checkpoint. These guys did a good job. Oh! Oh, now I'm a ninja. Can I shoot Chinese stars or something? No. What can I do as a ninja? Nothing? I guess I can go in here. Now, one thing I will point out to you as well is that we are looking at this in, this is a PAL system. I'm currently driving this out on 220 volts or 40 volts, whatever the heck it is, with my up converter. And, oh, cool, I didn't die. So, it's working okay, and the thing is that with this particular system, I purchased a cable that allows it to have a composite out, and the encoder that I have that upscales everything to 720 is PAL compatible, so we didn't have to worry about running into any issues there. This is going to end in disaster. I knew it. So anyway, it's working good. Now, this might not be the case with every PAL system I own, just because if I have to go up through an RF out, that's going to be a little bit trickier, because I did purchase a new converter box that kind of works like a VCR. And it works, and it worked okay. So we might try that in the future with something if I have another PAL system. You know, there's not a lot of dedicated PAL units, although I do have one thing we're going to try relatively soon that is PAL. You know, I'm not really going to go back and like try the Creative Vision out or anything. All right, anyway, I don't want to keep playing Sam's Journey. 1 second. I'm going to pause this for just a second. You won't even notice I'm gone, but I got to go get the other games. Okay. So the last game we're going to look at here is Shadow of the Beast by Psygnosis. Those were the people that were bought by Sony when the PlayStation first came out. They were the people that actually helped Sony to get things in order, and they release games and such. You know, and I don't know if they remained Psygnosis while they were in Sony's hands, but Shadow of the Beast was a famous game because of its parallax scrolling, as well as its rogue-like elements, you know, people say, which basically just means it's hard. Every time you get hit, which is like basically all the time. You basically just get hit all the time, and you can punch and you can kick. Tentacles, flying balls, cheap shots. It's all bullshit. But it does have some pretty good graphics for an 8-bit system. You would almost think it's 16-bit if the color palette was a little bit better. If you had some more memories for some frame rate, it would be pretty close, because it has the big sprites and it has the parallax scrolling. And even in the 16-bit era, sound was still kind of a mixed bag with video games. Some games had great sound in 16-bit era, whereas other ones, not so much. But, you know, it's one of the afterthoughts when you're dealing with a limited memory type of system, especially, you know, in the 16-bit era with cartridges where RAM isn't cheap. You know, do you do more frames of animation, or do you really want to put together like a really great soundtrack, you know? And if you do you want to spend more money on RAM, or do you want to cheap it out and there's no winning this game. Once you get into the castle, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I know some people do well with it, but it's one of those things where you just kind of have to memorize where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to do, and know all your moves. When I was a kid, I would master games like that, you know. You would know like you would be pixel perfect type of things. Like you would know exactly when to hit something based on how far away it was and all that sort of stuff. So you wouldn't get hit. Look at this giant. That was like a bomb. That didn't help me. No bombs. Dude, that thing's just kicking my ass. Well, now comes the giant fucking hands that you can't avoid. And the rocket. Get out of here, giant hand. Oh my god. We don't want anyone to win this game. Throw it all at them. The NES had tons of games like that, though, didn't they? Just games that were just ridiculous. You, like, basically couldn't win them. Now we're going to go into, like, the limbo mode here, where we're, like, in pure darkness. Yeah, this is just going to be bad. Can't go anywhere. No health left. Dun, dun, I died. Alright, so Commodore 64 game system. You know, it's the old 8-bit era. Games are hard. This works pretty good. Obviously, it works fine, but, you know, Commodore 64 can play all these games because the cartridges are compatible. So you'd be better off with the keyboard. Plus, you could play Terminator 2 if you wanted to. And add a disk drive or a tape drive if you wanted to be cheap. And, you know, play all the games, not just the ones that come on cartridges. So, a little bit of history here. Very, very rare. And, yeah, thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time with something else unusual and weird. Thanks. And here we have a copy of Chase Headquarters. Now, it's giving us the option of using the keyboard. We don't want to do that, obviously, and so we'll choose joystick port 2, which is pretty common. Special Criminal Investigation, Tato, Probe. The mayor's daughter has been kidnapped. Last seen in red Porsche heading east. Get going. All right. I think I played this a long time ago. This is like a kind of like a version of Outrun or something, but you could shoot at the bad guy. And, you know, old school 8-bit, difficult to do sprite scaling. This is doing a decent job of it, because pretty darn sure the sprites on the Commodore 64 did not have built-in sprite scaling, which basically means they get bigger and larger, so they were probably employing tricks to make that work. Now, that's just a guess. Bonk. but I don't think they did sprite scaling. And you could also do things where you didn't need, like the Commodore 64, I believe, could run 8 sprites. Simultaneously on the screen, but you could do this thing. You could do some tricks where you could program the raster, which is kind of like how the Atari 2600 actually drew all of its graphics, was you basically had to control the graphics as it was drawn on the screen. Essentially, you would tell it where to plot pixels. But at least unlike the Atari 2600, the Commodore 64 had some memory in it. So, you could potentially write something that, this game's really hard. That portion's like so far ahead of me. It's like I gotta push up, and in order to accelerate, but when I'm going through turns, I can't really accelerate. Or at least it's really hard to. And then, yeah, the car just starts. You gotta slow down, basically. I hate using brakes. Brakes aren't fun. So yeah, you could program the raster to do tricks to make the graphics better. Oh my god, I was right there too. It's bullshit. There's probably like a speed you just want to keep it at. Fuck, man. Like 158 or something. So you're not doing like 175, so you can still take turns, but not wipe out. And catch up to this dumb red Porsche. Oh my god. We can do it, folks. We're going to get to the Porsche. We're going to do it. Why does everybody on the road have to drive like an asshole? Out of the way. Police. Move your damn car. The last continues about to go up. Time out! Boo! Alright, anyway. That's Chase Headquarters.